Hindsight is often 20/20. How often in life have we looked back and thought, if only I knew then what I knew now? When we think in the retrospective, it is quite common to experience feelings of guilt, regret, and maybe even embarrassment over a certain situation. Indeed, afterthought can invoke some more pleasant, nostalgic feeling, but it can also stir something more painful and have us asking the question, why did I do what I did? Or, why didn't I do that when I had the chance? So of course, the ancient Greeks would have to make a deity out of such a notion, and attribute him with all the goofy and foolish traits that we disdain in ourselves. Furthermore, in this sense, the titan Epimetheus could also be widely criticized for his lack of wisdom, given that according to the ancients, he's the reason that none of us can fly. But more on that later. Many of you by now will know of the Titanomachy, the great war that took place between the Titans, who were led by the mad Cronus, and the Olympians, led by his son Zeus. After Cronus had begun swallowing his children in an effort to protect his rule, Zeus had been smuggled away and was promised to return to not only free his siblings from his father's stomach, but also to usurp him from his rule. When the time came, the Titans did not back down from the challenge of the younger gods, but were ultimately overcome by the might of Zeus. Despite having the numbers on their side, and boasting monstrous titans, such as the brothers Atlas and Menoetius, not every titan had sided with Cronus in his attempt to quell his son's rebellion. The second generation titans Prometheus, the wise, and Epimetheus, the not so wise, those who were also the brothers of Atlas and Menoetius, would remain neutral, and given how Zeus was seen to treat his titan captives, it's just as well they did. We know little of how Menoetius was dealt with, other than that he was destroyed by Zeus, presumably with a thunderbolt, whilst Atlas, as we famously know, was punished to hold the heavens in place for all eternity. Having remained neutral, Prometheus and Epimetheus were able to avoid such a fate, and despite their titan heritage, were shown clemency by Zeus for their impartiality. Indeed, we would later see that Prometheus would defy Zeus and ultimately go against him with his affections for man, though this too would earn the Titan the excruciating punishment of having his liver continuously picked apart by a bird. Epimetheus, meanwhile, appears to be the only brother who did not incur the wrath of Zeus, though this may be due to his foolhardiness and his considerable lack of threat when compared to his brothers. Despite this, his role in humanity's creation cannot be overlooked, for it is crucial, if not detrimental. From the mythology, we understand that after Zeus was victorious and finally reigned supreme over the earth, he wished to populate the earth with animals and men. Mankind would be particularly important, given that it was deemed that they would worship the gods and provide sacrifices to them in the form of foods and gifts. The task of creating man was issued to Prometheus and Epimetheus, and it is from clay that the brothers would go about sculpting every creature that would come to exist in this new world, a world cleared of monsters, giants and titans, and a world where mankind could live in some comfort and security. It is understood that Epimetheus was in charge of distributing the skills and characteristics to their creations, whilst Prometheus was something of a supervisor, checking over his brother's work before the final product was released into the wild. So diligent and focused in his role, Epimetheus made sure that no creature was unequipped in this new world, and while some certainly had advantages over others, no creature went out into the world without some sense or ability that enabled its survival. The birds were given wings, for which to soar the skies. The fish were given fins to cut through the waters. Land creatures, like the elephant and the rhinoceros, were given armor like hides, whilst the lions and the tigers were given agility and speed. The bears were given furs to warm them against the elements. The snakes were given venom, for which to defend against predators, and the wolves were given an acute sense of smell to seek out other prey. But so generous was Epimetheus with these gifts that by the time it came for man to receive his gifts, he found that he had none left to give. American author Edith Hamilton refers to Epimetheus as scatterbrained, and that he invariably followed his first impulse and then changed his mind. Such was the case here, for he had been so indulgent in dishing out these fantastic traits to the animals that he had completely overlooked mankind. It is here where he gets his reputation as Afterthought, or Afterthought personified, for it was only after he'd already made his grave mistake did he realise what he'd done. We are told by Edith Hamilton in her book, Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes, that, before making men, he gave all the best gifts to the animals: strength and swiftness and courage and shrewd cunning, fur and feathers and wings and shells and the like, until no good was left for man, no protective covering, and no quality to make them a match for the beasts. Upon hearing of Epimetheus' failure with mankind, Zeus was not willing to provide the new creation with any more skills. Perhaps this was Zeus guarding against mankind, for after having recognized the similarities in mankind and the gods, was aware that they too might have been ambitious enough to overthrow him, as he had recently done to Cronus. With that, he was more than happy for mankind to enter the world as they were, unprotected and unequipped to deal with its dangers. But it was Prometheus who took pity upon mankind, and after seeing his creation suffer in the wilderness, decided to do something about it. In one version of the myth, we are told by Edith Hamilton that Prometheus then took over the task of creation, and thought out a way to make mankind superior. He fashioned them in a nobler shape than the animals, upright like the gods, and then he went to heaven, to the sun, where he lit a torch and brought down fire, a protection to men far better than anything else, whether fur or feathers or strength or swiftness. Whilst there are later accounts of Prometheus going above and beyond for humanity, including tricking Zeus into allowing the humans to keep the lion's share of a sacrifice, and even stealing both fire from Hephaestus' workshop and wisdom from Athena, Epimetheus appears to relinquish his responsibilities of humanity, and is ultimately overlooked himself as a creator of man. This is likely due to the fact that Prometheus appeared to really cherish humanity, as opposed to just enjoying the novelty of creating them. When Epimetheus overlooked humanity's needs, and in some sense washed his hands of the endeavour, Prometheus continued to fight for humanity, and sacrificed his own well-being to ensure their survival. Furthermore, it might be said that the ancients were more keen to shun Epimetheus as their creator, given that not only had he botched humanity with his carelessness, but had he been more cautious, he might have given mankind the ability of flight or strength or agility that would rival the animals that we know of today. But Epimetheus' foolishness did not end with our botched creation. In fact, you might say that he only made things even harder for humanity in the following years after Prometheus' sacrifices. You see, after Prometheus had defied Zeus by providing humanity with fire, Zeus had to make an example out of him. And so, much like his brothers, Atlas and Menoetius, Prometheus was subject to the wrath of Zeus, and tied to a mountain where his liver was eternally picked apart by a bird. Before this punishment though, Prometheus, being forward-thinking, predicted that Zeus's anger at being outwitted by him would not be sated anytime soon. He gauged that Zeus would seek vengeance upon humanity, arguably as the product of Prometheus' wily ways, and that he would target humanity in a most insidious fashion. With this, he told Epimetheus not to accept any gift from the gods, deeming them all to be puppets of Zeus and condemning them all as untrustworthy. Epimetheus heeded his brother's words, but much as his name and character suggest, this heeding would not last, and you might say that anything his wiser brother had told him went through one ear and out the other, especially when he laid eyes on the gift that Zeus would send him. Her name was Pandora, and she was specially crafted by Hephaestus before having life breathed into her by either Zeus himself or by Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. While she was more curious than she was deadly, and innocent as opposed to wicked, at least in some versions, she was described as a great evil for man, as we'll soon see. Her charms and beauty were not just striking for man, however, who had never perceived such a creature as her, but they were also poised to seduce Epimetheus, and to arrest his interests like nothing he'd ever known. For such a short-sighted titan, you can imagine that this wasn't even that hard. Zeus could have probably created an average-looking woman, with meagre charms, and Epimetheus would have probably still been entirely distracted by her. But Pandora's remarkable beauty and character made her impossible for Epimetheus to deny, and before long, he was deeply in love with her. Now the gods had not sent Pandora to Epimetheus empty-handed. Indeed, they equipped her with a jar, and in this jar they had placed something harmful, before forbidding her from opening it. Epimetheus, who had by now long forgotten his brother's warning of accepting gifts from the gods, would marry Pandora, and with that, so began Zeus's master plan. It would appear that Prometheus was not the only character with such immense foresight, for Zeus had anticipated Pandora would soon be burning with curiosity. After all, he did have a hand in her creation. She turned to the jar that the gods had forbidden her from opening, and with each day that passed, she grew more and more eager to learn of its contents. In some variations, the jar was buried deep under her marriage bed with Epimetheus, likely so as to resist the temptation of opening it. In others, she had buried it out in the garden. In any case, despite a happy marriage with Epimetheus, the pull of the jar was constant, and the urge to peek inside would all but consume her as the days rolled on. So one night, Pandora snuck out to the burial place of the jar, and there she retrieved the elusive item, and against her better judgment, finally gave in to her curiosity. She opened the jar. Mystical shapes burst from the jar, fantastic shapes that awed her, at least at first. These shapes turned out to be deceit, old age, misery, blame, violence, ruin, discord, hardship, starvation, pain, war, and slaughter, all the things that would spell the end of the golden age of the world, and plunge it into a bleaker and foreboding one. And such was Zeus's revenge, for now the mankind that had been created by the troublesome Prometheus would now suffer, and even with their gift of fire, they would murder themselves, exploit one another, hurt each other in the most vicious of ways, and in the end, die miserable and old. And so the mortals, like Prometheus, learned that in the end there was no getting the better of Zeus, and that the supreme god would always have the last laugh in the end. Yet amongst these terrible essences that flew from Pandora's jar, one element remained: hope. Even today, it is arguably the only element we have to cling onto in trying times. Yet despite mankind having to suffer for Pandora's curiosity and Epimetheus' foolishness, the two of them managed to carve out a fairly decent relationship. Together they would give birth to a daughter named Pyrrha, who, as you might know, would become one of the only two mortals to survive the great flood that was sent by Zeus, alongside her husband, Deucalion. Of course, you might blame Epimetheus for the terrible things that mankind was thought to endure thereafter, for if he had never accepted Pandora, as his brother had warned him, then none of the evils inside the jar would be released. Though you might argue that given Pandora's curious personality, she might have gone ahead and opened the jar at some point anyway, even if Epimetheus had rejected her. Additionally, it would appear that despite suffering as a result of Zeus's master plan, Zeus would still wipe out humanity anyway, by drowning them all, thus, in some capacity, rendering the jar and its contents irrelevant. With this tremendous power, Zeus likely did not need Pandora to release the wicked things into the earth, much less did he need Epimetheus to accept her. In short, Epimetheus' failure to reject Pandora may not have condemned man to suffering, for Zeus would have likely ensured man's suffering one way or another. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Furthermore, if you're a fan of Greek mythology as much as I am, then you might want to check out a copy of our book, Greek Mythology Explained, where we retell a couple of our favourite myths and explore the meanings and themes behind them. With that being said, I hope you all have a good evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Until next time.